My name is Tara Gladden, and I am the Gallery Director and Curator for the Kohl Gallery at Washington College. Today, I'm talking with graduating senior Heber Guerra-Recinos, and he is participating in our Senior Capstone Exhibition, which is entitled UNSETTLED. And Heber's going to tell us a little bit about the work that he is showing in the exhibition. Hi, Heber.
Hello.
Tell us about your work. Tell us the title, show us some images, tell us a little bit of background about the work. Why don't we start there?
So my work, what have I been doing? I created a fictional news report of this disembodied person talking to you, and by you I mean the audience and whoever is reading the text and looking at the pictures about these I believe 5 or 6 figures who are supposed to be stand-ins for people who have recently I took the perspective of a year from now or a year or two from now, looking back on the current situation that we're in of the COVID-19 pandemic. And these 6 figures are supposed to be representative of people who took very perhaps absurd, exaggerated, very maybe not so intelligent decisions during the pandemic, or they're basically supposed to just be representations of a particular type of person that I'm sure we've all seen at least once, in the news or on social media, or at least heard things about. And so what are these figures? And so this news person, I'm just calling that for the sake of conversation, this news person is sharing with the audience that the communities of these respective people have decided to, I guess, accuse them. I'm not too familiar with justice or judicial law terms, but find them guilty of these crimes, so to speak, and their punishments for the action that they took during this pandemic that I believe I explicitly mentioned what happened for some of them. Their punishment is in some way related to what they did, or at least to some aspect of who they are as a person. And yeah, that's sort of an entryway into what the work is. The materials I use, generally I tried to use household materials that I could find. So for a number of them, I used cereal boxes that I made into these figurines. I used artist tape. I use aluminum foil. I use chalk. Just very simple household items.
Yeah, so I actually was wondering how you would describe what the form is of what you've done. I mean, it struck me as a kind of dystopic tale of speculative fiction
Mm-hmm.
that I looked at it before this interview. So the way in which it was presented kind of reminded me almost of a graphic novel. But it's interesting to hear you talk about it as a newscast. I mean, are you thinking about it more in line of almost like a newspaper, or are you thinking about it more almost as if it would be delivered, I don't know, on a TV or something like that, almost like it's a storyboard for something else that it might
Right.
be another form, like a video?
Okay. So I don't think I had exactly one form in mind. I think it was maybe a mesh of all types of things. So the way I wrote the things and presented the images and the text, I did that kind of with how I said before, a news report, something you would see, I don't know, if you're watching, I don't know, The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, because I watch a lot of him, or something you would just see on the news, something very not hard to find, but just something that would be presented to you. So that was sort of the initial structure. I also thought about maybe creating some sort of, like you said, speculative fiction, because a while ago you gave me some feedback in particular about narrative, because as an English major as well as an art major, narrative and stories and literature are something that I kind of always have to be thinking about when it comes to my work or what I'm studying. And so I thought to myself, how can I make this into like a story of sorts, like maybe something you would even find like in a collection of, I don't know, flash fiction or like short stories. Um, and there are some elements of like comics and graphic novels that I also include in there because I included images, and then with the images are like captions of like what's happening. Like sometimes like a few sentences or like whole paragraphs, and so it's kind of like a mesh of like different forms, not necessarily adhering to one in particular, but I think drawing from like the ones I've named in a variety of ways.
I think the combination of the characters that, or the figures that you created, in combination with the images that you created of those characters in different scenarios, combined with the narrative of each of those figures or people, however you want to think about them, I think it works really well in
Well,
terms of.
thank you.
I think the narrative serves the figures well. Like the figures just seem like I wanted to know more about them, you know. So I think working through a narrative creates this situation where I was able to learn more about the figures. They had an animated, when I saw them, they had a very animated quality to me. So it just seemed like, yeah, I just wanted to know more about them. So I think the ultimate form of combining them with a narrative works well. Um, Something I'd like to talk about is, so, you know, the narrative, the way I internalized it in reading it is, you know, basically it's the story of like 5 or 6 individuals or figures who have not done what they're supposed to do during the COVID-19 virus, you know, during our present situation, and really have no
Hmm.
remorse for the way they've handled things, and their actions have created a certain amount of karma, you know, and
Hmm.
have affected other people, and you know, their very selfish actions have created terrible situations and circumstances. In the course of telling this story, telling this narrative about these people, then, you know, we move into this, you know, each person has their own story where we see what the consequences are of those actions. So you know, their communities come together to give them some kind of punishment or a verdict. uh,
Hmm.
and some of these punishments are extremely violent punishments, and so in the work you're very clearly exploring themes that have to do with selfishness and consequence and violence. And I'm curious about what prompted you to work with such violent themes. Are you referencing any particular histories or events in regard to the violence you're portraying?
Lots of questions. That's a good question. Thank you. Um, so yes, you're right about that. Like for one, like my work is very explicit in like the violent nature of the things that I enacted upon these figures in the narratives or whatnot. In terms of, am I like referencing any histories with like the violent acts? Um, Intentionally, no, but I am aware, just because like it's sitting at the back of my mind or feedback from my other, you know, from my art senior peers or my peers, is so I am intentionally not trying to like allude to any specific like moment in history. Like for example, one of the figures is crucified and then burned at the stake. Like clearly that's not not modern, but like that was very prevalent and very like popular and very associated with a specific time in history. Am I referencing that particular time in history? No, but I am just kind of leaving it there for like the sake of just dropping it there and moving on. Like another figure that I mentioned was like I like tied like a, I think, a fishing wire around like its neck, so to speak, and then I like hanged it from a tree. Is that referencing a particular time in history, particularly U.S. history? Yes. I am. Am I like specifically explicitly referencing that? No. But am I aware of of the like the history behind it. Yes. And so whether this I will be the first to acknowledge that this may or may not be effective because, obviously if you're going to reference something, you have to be aware of the weight that that history has behind it. And so am I explicitly referencing, lynchings or crucifixions or burning at the cross or isolation in an anechoic chamber? Like, no, I'm not really interested in that. But for me, I think my intention behind that was in referencing these incredibly violent and, therefore like dark and very uncomfortable times or even subjects to this tackle. I'm attempting to, or at least I think I'm attempting to bring in that sort of violent nature into my work and sort of attempting to connect what I'm trying to say to what the people were doing back then. That was a very muddled way of putting it, but I think what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to make people uncomfortable with my work. And in doing so, I'm trying to call back to moments and times throughout history where every time we talk about it or every time we think about it, we get a little uncomfortable at how, for lack of a better way of putting it, how really messed up it was, or how really violent and dark the actions people took against other people were. But again, if that's successful or not, I will acknowledge and own up to, the what's the word? Like, the negative reception to it because it may be uncomfortable for some viewers for right reasons, for all the right reasons. And so again, it's for me, I'm more just interested in looking at like the violent aspects and what that says for the people who enacted this violence rather than just like the moment in history.